The basketball show with a mailbag from you guys reacting to the historic win for Auburn in Tuscaloosa over Alabama, one versus two. Some questions are about that. A lot of questions about Auburn and Alabama moving forward, little T. But it was such a big moment. I want to react one more time to that. So let's start with just you've had a night to sleep on it. You had to drive back by yourself. I saw your TikTok where you couldn't come up with the words, and now you've slept on it, and it's Sunday. Is it still feeling as good for you as it hurts for me?
Yes, I'm still having a hard time coming up with words because I said this last night when we did our live post game. I genuinely thought that Alabama was going to win that game because the atmosphere. First off, it's just hard to win on the road. The atmosphere, everything around the game, all of the outside noise, all of the excitement, all of the hype. And then on top of that, Alabama has been playing lights out recently while Auburn hasn't been looking their best. Just so the combination of all of those things had me believing that Alabama was going to win the game. Auburn, I mean, I'm just mind blown at how good this team is. We saw them play like they did last night, earlier this season at times, looking, unbeatable to a point, and they looked like that again last night. And just to go on the road and do that in a hostile environment and in a game that's emotional to begin with because of how big that rivalry is was just so impressive to me.
Very happy for all my Auburn friends. My dearest friends are Auburn people, including you. Very happy for the Pearls. You know how much I love them. But I grew up an Alabama guy, and I cannot imagine how Nate Oates and the players feel today because I know I woke up going, man, that one, I can't remember a basketball loss that has hung around to the next day for me. I mean, maybe it's because you and I do this show now on the reg, and I'm more dialed into basketball than ever before. Like I feel like I know everybody's name and backstory and point scoring percentage and rebounds. But I wanted that to be what it was for that brief moment of time back and forth when they were draining threes at each end of the floor. I wanted it to be that for 40 minutes. And I just felt like Alabama didn't live up to their end of the bargain. Like you guys brought it. And I wish Alabama would have played a little bit better to make it an even more classic game. And as I said in the post game, I give all the credit to Auburn's defense on keeping Alabama. And I know it was 94-85. There were a lot of points going, but a day later, and I've gone back and watched the TV broadcast now, I'm like, God, nothing ever looked easy for Alabama that whole day, including the opening tip where the ref threw it to Auburn, by the way. But you had 39 minutes, you had 39 minutes and 59 seconds to overcome an illegal toss. But I
Yeah,
digress.
let's blame the refs. The
I
refs
never
won the
blame.
game for Auburn.
I never blamed the refs. It was just a crappy toss right out of the gate. I should have saw what was coming. I'm glad I wanted mybookie.ag. They bring you this, of course, mybookie.ag promo code next round. And there's a lot of factors. Let's go with some of the Alabama things first from our audience here. Um, because there were a lot of questions here that I found very interesting. And let's go with R.A. Clifton first. Is there a player on Alabama who can take the pressure off of Mark Sears a bit to help him out, or does he have to keep grinding it out? So I'll ask you first: is there a player you can see for Alabama that can help relieve the pressure offensively on Mark Sears? Because late in the game, it seemed like he was the only one taking shots.
Yeah, I think at times this season, Aden Holloway has been that guy that has, I guess, taken some of the pressure off him. But, and this is my opinion, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I feel like he has less pressure on him offensively this year than he did last year.
He should, because he's got more weapons around him. I felt like
Right.
he and Grant Nelson had to carry so much offensively last year. But that gets us right to G.A. Murray, who says, what happened to Mark Sears? Not even close to the same player last year. So I combined those two together. Is there anybody who can help Mark out? And why does it look different? Why does it feel different than last year when Mark was playing 38, 39 minutes and feeling like he had to score 20 plus every night. He's still, still scoring a lot of points a game.
Mhm.
It feels different. It does feel different. I don't know why it feels different. I think it feels different, little T, and you may have hit on it right there, is because you see Aden Holloway score points. You see Chris Youngblood scoring points. You know what Jaron Stevenson did last year. You know what Grant Nelson did earlier this year. You know what Labaron Philon did earlier this year. So you've seen other guys do it. You didn't know that last year. Last year it had to be Mark Sears and Grant Nelson every freaking night. And I wonder if that's impacted Mark a little bit, knowing that, okay, I've got other guys. So is he passing up some shots that he normally would have taken last year? And because last year it felt like every time he was going to shoot a three, or drive to the basket, get a bucket, or get fouled, and it got redundant late. That's what he was doing. Maybe, I don't know. I have no answers. If I had answers, I'd call Nate Oates. Hey, Nate, sorry to bother you on a Sunday. Here's what's wrong. I've got no answers, but I agree with them. It looks like somebody else has to help Mark out, and Mark doesn't look the same as he did last year. It's a
So
combination.
I looked at his averages, and obviously last year it's a season average of last year compared to this point in the season this year. So the number of games is drastically different. But last year he's playing similar minutes. Last year he averaged 33.6 minutes a game. This year he's averaging 32.1. Last season he was shooting 50.8% from the field. He's currently shooting 39.7. From three, he's shooting 34.5% currently. Last season, he was shooting 43.6%. Last season, averaging 21.5 points per game. This season, averaging 17.8. And
Ooh, that's
something
four.
that I
That 4
wonder,
points is pretty big on average. That's a big
yeah, and
drop
his,
off.
I mean, his shooting percentages have decreased. And something that I'm wondering is you never know what makes a player tick. And I'll use Tahad Pettiford as an example. Something that we've talked about all season really is that he's had his best games in Auburn's biggest games. He's put up the most points, had the best performances versus Auburn's ranked opponents, which is not typical, but he feeds off that. So going back to last season, I'm wondering if Mark Sears plays better when he knows that, he's got to put the team on his back. Because last season they were so reliant on him to be offensively productive night in and night out. And I wonder if that is a mental thing for him. There's motivators that impact these guys the way they play. That's just how they are. That's how Tahad is. He plays better when the lights are brightest. And I'm wondering if Mark plays better when he knows that his team's relying on him. This is speculation and me. I don't know. This might be considered a conspiracy theory here,
Right.
but I'm wondering if that's what makes him tick. He's like, I like feeling like this is do or die. And when, like you said, he has more options if he gets a little bit more lax. I don't know if that even makes sense what I just said, but do you understand what I'm saying?
100%. Sometimes if you are the only weapon, if you know it's all on your back, then the only thing you have to worry about is doing it for yourself. I mean, you got to do it. I've got to
Yeah.
do it. And if there are other people, let's just go through what Mark's been dealing with this year. He's been dealing with turnovers. It's been a big talking point lately. Stop turning the ball over, Mark. Okay, so I got to stop turning the ball over. Play better defense, Mark. Okay, I've got to play better defense now. And it's just been like one thing. I do this, Mark. Do this, Mark. Do this, Mark. And oh, by the way, still be a guy that scores 21 points a game. Last year, you didn't hear as much talk about the turnovers. You didn't hear as much. I mean, Alabama sucked defensively last year until they got to the tournament. You didn't hear a lot of talk all year long about Alabama's defense. You did, but nobody. No, it was never going to get fixed. They struggled all year until they got to the NCAA tournament and played a lot better defense when they got there. But Mark, trying to up his defensive game, trying to cut down on the turnovers. And I think somehow that's taken away from his flow offensively. But other people have to step up, and that's what Ethan asked here. What was the leading factor causing Bama to lose? I'll get to my answer in a second. I want your from the other side of the aisle. Why do you think Alabama lost that game yesterday? Ethan wants to know. Tell Ethan.
Ethan, I think that it was Auburn's defense. And I went back and did because there's a talking point that I've been seeing on Twitter a lot since the game ended was the fact that the combination of Aden Holloway and Mark Sears last night, they were 3 of 15 from three. And we've said time and time again this season that Alabama, there's a narrative, I guess, that they live and die by the three. And that's not necessarily the case, but that is what can put the dagger in their opponents sometimes is they're scoring points in the paint, but they can also hit a shot from deep. And so the two of them last night hit 3 of their 15 attempted 3-point shots. They shot 20% from three. So I went back and looked at all of their other SEC games. So I think they've played 12 now. The other 11 SEC games, they shot 33%, 62%, 43, 33, 37, 62, 30, 50, 44, 37, 45. So their worst shooting percentage, those two combined from three prior to last night, was 30%. So that was a 10% decrease. So I think it was Auburn's defense. I think they weren't able to get clean shots off. The majority of them were contested. And something else that Nate Oates talked about, I just listened to his press conference, kind of rushed, but he was talking about how the number of assists that they had was drastically lower
Ooh.
than, their average throughout the season up until yesterday. They had, as a team, they had 8 assists.
Okay, yeah, it was four for a lot of the game, so they got some late. Yeah,
Yes, they had 8 assists. So I just don't. And Nate said this too. He said we just weren't really able to move the ball how we typically do. So I think that their offense was just thrown off because Auburn was playing smothering defense.
yeah, and I said that instantly after the game, so I agree with you. But Ethan, I'll give you another example because Alabama still managed to. It's hard to imagine how hard it was for Alabama, and they still scored 85. So
Hmm.
I would also throw in the fact that I didn't think Alabama's perimeter defense was very good. Look at all the threes that Auburn hit. How many of those were open threes? After a pass inside would kick back out, and Chaney would hit one, Denver would hit one, Pettiford would hit one. I mean, you look at the wide open threes or a late Alabama rushing defender to get out there, it was night and day at each end of the floor. Alabama's perimeter 3-point line defense was not smothering. Meanwhile, on the other side, if Alabama was taking an open three, they were taking it from 26 feet from way back. So I think those are two reasons why Ethan they lost the
And
basketball game.
I have one more point to make on that. I don't know who asked the question in the press conference, but there was a question that Nate Oates was asked after the game yesterday, and Alabama was 3 of 10, I think, from the field when the game was within. I believe it was when the game was within 3 points, which this is such a niche stat.
Yeah.
But Nate was asked why do you think that is? And he said, I mean, you start playing a little lax. Speaking on Auburn, like defensively, it's human nature to start playing a little lax if you're up 10, if you're up 14 when the game gets closer. But that was something that I also found very interesting was that the game got close a number of times. It was
Yep.
tied. Alabama tied it up twice, I think,
Yeah.
but it got close, multiple times,
Yeah. I mean, it
and
was it was
then
the whole
Auburn
game.
was pulling away.
It was like 9 points, and then Alabama would be like, "Oh, they've cut it to one," and then
Yeah,
boom, 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 it's 9 points again, and then Alabama would cut it to two, and then boom, 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 oh, it's 10 now, and then Alabama would cut it to one, and then boom, 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 it's 14 now. It was amazing. Like they would get so close to what you were saying, and then Auburn would, I guess, what Nate was saying would be, "Oh, we need to play defense again, smother, and boom, 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 three consecutive buckets, and it's back out to nine again." It was amazing.
yeah. It's a game of runs.
Yeah, it was a run to get back to that original nine. It was 9-0 out of the gate, and then Alabama would fight back to get it even, and then it would go back to nine. Those first 9 points ended up being huge. Um, All right, one more from Cliff. He wants to know, does Alabama change some of their offensive identity with balance, plays versus run and gun? They won't change anything. I do think that when Nate and the staff and the players go back and watch the tape, whether it's today or tomorrow, whenever they ended up watching this tape, I think they will realize that they got very stagnant offensively late in the game. Not a lot of movement when Mark was dribbling the basketball. He would be dribbling on the perimeter and nobody else was really moving around at all. It was a lot of standing around, and I think that will be a focal point moving forward, but they will not change schemes. Nick wants to know, Nick W3, are both teams a one seed when it's all said and done this year? Auburn, for those that missed the CBS show from the selection committee yesterday, Auburn's a one overall seed, and they talked about a gap between Auburn and the next number one seed. So Auburn has multiple losses they can have before they even lose the number one overall seed. So Auburn's not going to fall off the one line. Alabama is a one seed. Hard to imagine losing to the dominant big gap between Auburn and everybody else. Even losing at home by 9, I don't think it's going to change Alabama's situation at all. But when it's all said and done, because Alabama has such a tough schedule still to come, do you do you still think both of these teams are a one seed when we get to Selection Sunday?
Yeah, and I think their non-conference schedules are playing to their favor for both teams because unlike football, the record isn't the end all be all for seeding for the NCAA tournament. They take into consideration strength of schedule. The SEC, they're gonna SEC teams when they look at SEC teams conference records, they're gonna look at that differently than they're gonna look at the conference records of teams in other conferences because the SEC it's cannibalism. It's everyone's beating up on each other because right now I think there's 13 projected teams that will be tournament teams. So, yes, I think so because Alabama's remaining strength of schedule is number 1, not in the SEC in the country. And that is looked at. That's factored in. And I know the good loss, bad loss, people will talk about that. Like yesterday, does it hurt? Yes. But that is not a bad loss that's going to be, a big red mark on your resume. And so I think that is something to keep in the back of your mind, really, as a fan of any team, is the fact that they pay attention to the teams that you're losing to, you
Yeah,
know? And with
and
quad one
I
losses
agree.
aren't gonna spiral, make your season spiral.
Yeah, I agree with you. The worst Alabama could end up being, I believe, is a two seed right now with the remaining schedule they have. Um, but I still think they will hold on to a one seed. That gets us to Riley's question. Riley wants to know, how do you feel about this win and how will it help us through the rest of the season? With the win, that means he's talking Auburn here or she's talking Auburn. How do you feel about this win and how will it help us through the rest of the season, Taylor?
I personally feel great about it. I think in terms of the rest of the season, I think that has to inject this team with confidence. Knowing in the back of your mind that you can go into an environment like that. And again, I've said this, way too many times, but it was an emotional game. Rivalries are always emotional. Add to that the fact that this was a 1-2 game, that like being able to go in and win a game has to skyrocket your confidence. And when you're going to play, the NCAA tournament, those are all neutral site games. So those aren't necessarily road games, but in terms of the rest of the conference schedule, when you go on there, like when they still have to go to Rupp. So that's going to help. They're having that experience, knowing that they're capable of going on the road, playing a really, really good Alabama team and winning on their home court. I think it works wonders for your confidence. Not that this team was lacking it,
Yeah.
but
No, no, to your point, I was listening to some national folks last night, Field of 68, the basketball. It's not called the basketball show because I think we have that copyrighted, but it was a basketball show on Sirius XM. And then on Sports Center when I got home, and basketball people, analysts, were calling Auburn's win in Tuscaloosa the best win of the season. Like when you stack up all of Auburn's wins and all of the wins in the country this year, they were calling Auburn's win in Tuscaloosa. Now, part of its instant reaction was one versus two for the first time in SEC history, first time this year, one versus two. But it was also 1 and 2 in a lot of people's bracketology, and it was on Alabama's home floor, and it was by 9. So Iowa State was it for a while for me. When Auburn beat them in Maui and came from way down. There have been some other really good wins. Houston, practically a road game, neutral site, but
in
I mean,
Houston.
in Houston. There were some wins, but national people were calling their win over Alabama in Tuscaloosa the best win in college basketball this year. So when you get the best win in college basketball, and they've got a list of good wins that they can have a debate on which one is the best one, I think it can only help you. And with all due respect, with the road win at Vandy, I think that win in Tuscaloosa sort of what I believe Bruce and Stephen Pearl really believed after the Florida loss was, okay, that was a loss, but that's a good team. That didn't hurt us. I think they feel like after winning at Alabama, that home loss to Florida, they equal each other out, man. If you losing to a team that should be a 1 seed as well at home, we just went and beat a team that's a 1 seed on the road. No worries at all. Is the way I would feel if I was an Auburn person. The team's good enough to win the national championship, and everyone is talking about that. Dilly Main wants to know, what game do you predict Auburn will clinch the regular season SEC championship? So they got a 1 game lead over Alabama, and they've got 6 games left. So, and I think they have a 2 game lead over Florida, if I'm right about that. So with
And
six games
A&M.
left, here we go. Peace signing balloons again. I'm so sorry about that. You got to show me how to turn that off eventually before we get to the serious tournament time. Um, so yeah, I mean, Auburn's got some tough games obviously coming up. Alabama's got the toughest schedule in the country, but you got to factor in Florida wins, Florida losses, Alabama wins, Alabama losses, and what Auburn does with a game lead and a 2 game lead on when you think, okay, that game clinching SEC regular season um, game could be. And I assume from Dilly Main, he doesn't think it will be the Alabama game at the end of the year, that Auburn has a chance, and they do, to have it locked up before that final game at Neville Arena. So if you had to look on the Auburn schedule, where do you think Auburn could clinch and technically cut down the nets as SEC champions?
It's kind of hard to say because, like you just said, yes, Auburn winning games obviously factors into this, but it also depends what the teams that are right below them do. It depends
That's
what
right.
Alabama does. It depends what Florida does. It depends what Texas A&M does. Because if those teams keep winning games, Auburn loses a game that they're not expected to lose, then the race keeps tightening up. But if Alabama loses again, Florida loses again, Texas A&M loses again, or any of those teams lose, one or two in a row, lose one, two or three in a row, that, is not expected because Auburn's remaining strength of schedule is listed as 13th in the country. Alabama's is first, Florida's is 14th, A&M's is seventh. So they all have challenging games coming up. Some against each other. Alabama still plays Florida. Auburn still plays A&M. So, I mean, I don't even really know how to make a prediction on this really because there's no way to, like, we don't
Yeah.
know what the teams around them are going to do. And
Well,
that plays a role in this.
just simple math. If Alabama doesn't lose again in the 5 games, then you can't clinch it until the game against Alabama.
Right.
If Alabama loses one and Alabama wins them all, you'll have a chance to clinch it in the game before Alabama. Um, if Florida loses again and Alabama loses twice, you'll have a chance to clinch it 2 games before Alabama. If I had to guess, I think technically my guess would be the Texas A&M game, and that's in College Station, I believe, right before Alabama, could be the one that has it wrapped up. I personally don't think, just with Alabama's toughness of schedule and what Auburn has left, I do believe, to Dilly Main's point, that Auburn will have it clinched by the time we play that game in Neville Arena.
Yeah, and I'll say this. If Alabama would have won yesterday, I think that the game in Auburn at the end of the season, there's a good chance that that would have been the deciding game.
Yep. I think so too. I think so too. Just because I do believe Alabama, likely would drop one of these tough games coming up. Florida at Tennessee, home to Kentucky, that tough, massive schedule. And, Auburn may or may not lose another one. Trent wants to know, is Chaney the emerging X factor that separates Auburn from the rest of the SEC? Well, Auburn's already separated from the rest of the SEC. They're already separated from everyone else in the country. But what is, according to Trent, what is Chaney and how he's performed the last two games for Auburn down the stretch, in your opinion?
I think, yes, I think he's one of the X factors on this team. And we talked about this briefly last night when we did the reaction show, but something that will benefit this team down the stretch is when Dylan gets in foul trouble, like he did yesterday, having a guy like Chaney, because Chaney's coming off the bench too. And he is looking like he could be a starter at a lot of Division I schools right now with the way he's been playing over the past couple games. And he's very level-headed. Auburn has a very emotional team. Chaney isn't one of those guys that you ever have to really worry about losing his cool. And if Dylan gets in foul trouble, like we've seen a number of times throughout the season, having someone that you genuinely trust and can rely on, not just to hold it down, if they need to pull Dylan off for a little bit, but to be productive. Auburn had yesterday in Tuscaloosa, Auburn had 42 bench points. They have Todd coming off the bench. They have Chaney coming off the bench. And those two, I mean, they put up 27 between the two of them. And I mean, yeah, I think that he plays a massive role. And the fact that they again have him coming off the bench is very, very valuable.
Did you hear our discussion on the next round about the bench players? If you took Alabama and Auburn's bench and
Yes,
made them a team,
yes.
how good that team would be. I mean, just think you'd have Chaney and Pettiford and Philon and Darian Reed from Alabama,
Aden,
Aden Holloway
Mo
from Alabama,
Diabate.
Mo Diabate. I mean, you'd have a pretty dang good team.
Oh my gosh, yes,
Yeah. I wonder if that bench team would beat either Auburn or Alabama or both of them. That would be a fun series
it
and
would be.
some 5-on-5. Buddy says a simple question: why not rest Janai down the stretch to give him a chance to heal up for the postseason? They'll need him, no doubt, in the postseason. And that becomes a question now. I don't know the medical report, but I'd love to hear your thoughts because he's still struggling. You can tell he's still limping at times, more often certain times than others. But you by the committee's words, there's a gap between Auburn, the number one overall seed, and the second number one seed. There's a gap. So I don't know if resting would help him, but if the doctor said, "Hey, man, if you gave him a full 2 weeks off," is that something you'd want to consider?
I don't think Janai wants to because when he came back, they said he's not at risk of worsening the injury. Like him playing isn't going to worsen it. It might just be
Right.
lingering pain and the soreness, the stiffness would probably decrease a decent amount, I would assume, if he did sit. But in the mind of Janai, I'm assuming he's thinking, I might be in a little bit of pain when I'm playing, but if I'm not going to worsen the injury, I want to play. I mean, he wants to play. And that's something
Yep.
that Bruce talked about during his press conference. It was one of the press conferences last week, or it may have been post Bandy. He said, look, Janai, he said he has not one time brought up NBA draft stock, national player of the year, either wanting to get back so that the gap between he and Cooper Flag in terms of the national player of the year race widens, or sitting so that he doesn't, in fear of worsening his ankle injury and decreasing his stock. He said he wants to be on the court with his teammates. He said he not one time has a word come out of his mouth about any, personal accolades or anything like that in terms of wanting to sit longer for and they would let him is the thing. And Steven told y'all on one of his weekly appearances. It's up to him. When the doctors say that he's cleared to play, then we're going to let him play if he wants to play, but we're not pressuring him to come back. We want him to feel comfortable and confident that he's, feels good enough. And I mean, I don't know, like you said, I don't know the medical report in terms of what specifically is going on. I don't think that will happen. We might see decreased minutes. That wouldn't necessarily surprise me if Auburn has a big lead in one of these games. I could see him maybe not playing as much, but I just don't see that happening because I don't think that he wants to. I think that he would rather play through the pain than sit on the bench and watch.
If Auburn wins the national championship and won the SEC basketball tournament, he's only got 15 maximum games left in his college career in the Auburn uniform. Just 15 more games.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
you're gonna tell a kid that, hey, we're gonna sit you 2 weeks, and the maximum number of games you can have in an Auburn uniform is 11 at that point. I mean, he wants to play. It's a great example. Wesley wants to know, do you agree with Denver Jones being one of the best defenders in college basketball? I'll give a short answer. Yes. Just look what he did yesterday in Tuscaloosa. You give a longer answer. Do you agree Denver Jones is one of the best defenders in college basketball?
Yes. And Bruce literally started pleading with the media last night post game, saying, I would appreciate if y'all would start talking about him as one of the best defenders in college basketball because he is. And I went back, I remembered seeing this, and this was the end of January. So a number of games. This was when Auburn had played 18 games. So I didn't have time to go back and look at stats from the games that have happened since this was posted. But Justin Ferguson posted this on Twitter a couple weeks ago. And Denver Jones' primary defensive matchups through the first 18 games had worse numbers than their season averages points per game in 13 of 18 games. These are Denver Jones' primary defensive matchups. 16 of 18, they shot, in 16 of 18 games, they shot a worse field goal percentage. And in 15 of 18 games, shot a worse 3-point percentage. So he has, yes, yes. And it's hard if you're looking at, a stat box to put value on defensive efforts because it's hard to record that type of stuff. It's not points per game, but I looked at that and I thought that was interesting and I remembered it when we saw this question. So yes. Yes. And something
Yes.
that Bruce said was he's not blocking a bunch of shots. He's not the flashy stuff. His numbers might not be as high in those categories, but just playing straight defense,
Yeah.
there's not much
Just
more that you could ask for.
team is really good, and he is the leader of that defensive team. And it helps when you have Dylan and Johni behind you to clean up anything with blocked shots. Kevin wants to know to be our final question of the day. We appreciate. I mean, it was a record off of a record game in from jam-packed Coleman Coliseum. Great atmosphere. Auburn wins at 94-85. We had a record number of questions, so we apologize for those we didn't get to. But Kevin wants to know thus far, how would you grade the transfer portal additions for Auburn and Alabama? I know at Alabama we got, and I'm only going by. I mean, the whole team seems like everybody's team seems like for the most part they were somewhere else to start their career. Not everybody was recruited there, but we'll just go portal from last year to this year. New faces on the team in Tuscaloosa. I got Aden, Cliff, and Youngblood that contribute a lot. Miles and who else at Auburn are portal guys because Pettiford's a recruit, right?
Yeah, Pettiford's a recruit and Jakai's a recruit. JP Pegues, which
Pegues, yeah.
breaks my heart.
Yeah,
And
not as big a factor as we expected.
Turtle
Yeah,
Hudson.
and Turtle Hudson not the factor. So really,
It's Miles.
it's Miles Kelly or you've already been there at least 1 year because Chaney came from the portal and even
Yeah, there are a lot
Janai
of
came from
JUCO guys.
yeah. But from last year's team that wasn't there to this year at Auburn, Miles Kelly. That's an A. I mean,
Yes.
can't disagree with that. That's really good. And then for Alabama, I mean, Darian Reed and Philon are recruits, but Aden and Cliff and Youngblood, Millette's injured. Um, Aden and Youngblood, you can't disagree with. Cliff is the piece they didn't have last year. Offensively, does he fit what they try to do? No, but he he I would give Aiden an A. I'd give Youngblood an A. I'd give Cliff a B plus. He
I'm
just isn't. He doesn't seem to fit what they try to do and the speed they try to play at. But then at times, there was a brief moment in the game that alley oop to him was the best thing they had going.
Yeah, that was crazy. But I think the thing with Cliff as well is, do you remember the hype around this guy
Yes,
during the off
yes,
season?
yes,
It was the only thing that was being tweeted about by Alabama fans. And so I
yes.
think that, me personally, I think that I had maybe unrealistically high expectations because it seems like this kid was going to be the next great fill in the blank,
Yep.
because the excitement around him was through the roof. And that might be a me issue, thinking, okay, well, my expectations because of all the excitement were that he was going to be, I don't know if the star of this team is, that might be pushing it, but a name that we were going to be talking about a lot.
Yeah.
And he has had moments, but overall, I definitely think, and I think that most would agree, Aden and Youngblood are definitely, a step above.
Yeah, and neither one of them had their best games. They were neutralized by the Auburn defense as well. But that's in the rearview mirror now for Alabama. They got to focus. They got some tough games coming up, including a road game at Missouri. Auburn has a game with Arkansas at home. Taylor will be down in Neville Arena for that game coming up this week. We'll have post game after both of those 8 o'clock affairs. I'll anchor it from Birmingham, and we'll be ready to go with the post game basketball show live coming up with the midweek game, and then we'll have another recorded version coming up. We wanted to start a new tradition today, ending the show with bringing out a special guest from behind one of the doors behind Taylor. Taylor behind door number two. Who's I always love that. In the future, we could do that. If we ever have studio guests, they would walk out from one of those doors and
Well, considering I'm in my bedroom and that's my closet, I would be holding a hostage in my closet.
Oh, if it's the way my closet was in my 20s, there would be a stack of clothes in there time for me to do Sunday afternoon laundry, and I'd be
Yeah,
pulling them out of the floor in there.
that's why the
Uh,
doors are shut.
yeah. All right, little T, enjoy your Sunday, and I will see you at work on Monday, 9 a.m. Monday Central Time, and all the time for the next round. We'll be talking basketball and reacting to what we saw. And then more of the basketball show. Remember to like, thumbs up, comment to us when you see us. We've enjoyed it so much this year, and we're down to the final 3 weeks of the regular season, and we can start talking about the second matchup between Auburn and Alabama coming up at Neville Arena March the 8th. All right, T. Thank you, bud.
See y'all.